At the reunion, my name wasn't on the list. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I spent 3 hours getting ready for my 20-year high school reunion. 3 hours. I can't remember the last time I took that long preparing for anything, not even my wedding. But something about returning to Jefferson High after 2 decades made me want to look perfect, or at least like I'd figured out my life since graduation. Standing in front of my bedroom mirror that Saturday evening in October, I adjusted my navy blazer for the 10th time and wondered if I looked successful enough. Would my former classmates see the VP of marketing at a tech company? Or would they still see awkward Daniel Chen, the kid who ate lunch alone in the chemistry lab because he was too shy to sit in the cafeteria? I'd been looking forward to this night for months. The Facebook event had appeared in my feed back in June, and I'd immediately clicked attending with an enthusiasm that surprised me. High school hadn't been the best 4 years of my life, far from it, but I was curious about how everyone had turned out. More than curious, actually. I was excited. The reunion committee had been posting updates all summer, photos of the old building, now renovated beyond recognition, lists of classmates who'd RSVP'd yes, teaser posts about the memorial table for those we'd lost. Each update made the anticipation build stronger. This was my chance to close the loop on that chapter of my life, to show everyone who I'd become, to maybe even reconnect with people I'd lost touch with. I'd practiced conversations in my head. What I'd say when someone asked what I was doing now. How I'd respond when people brought up old memories. I'd even prepared a few self-deprecating jokes about how different I looked without braces, and that unfortunate haircut I'd maintained throughout sophomore year. The drive to the Marriott downtown took 45 minutes, and I used every one of them to pump myself up. The reunion was being held in the Grand Ballroom, the same place where we'd had our senior prom 20 years ago. I wondered if anyone else would remember that detail, if it would spark the kind of shared nostalgia that makes these events special. I'd chosen the Marriott location carefully when I booked my room. I wanted to be able to walk back upstairs afterward, maybe invite a few people up to continue the conversation. I had visions of small groups gathering in the hotel bar afterward, the way adults do, sharing stories and catching up properly without the constraints of a formal event. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife Rachel. "Have fun tonight. Can't wait to hear all about it. Take lots of pictures." She'd wanted to come as my +1, but I'd decided to go alone. This felt like something I needed to do by myself, a personal pilgrimage back to the person I used to be. The hotel parking garage was busier than usual, and I had to park on the 3rd level. As I walked toward the elevators, I could hear the distant sound of music and laughter coming from somewhere in the building. My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. After 20 years, I was finally going back. The elevator ride to the lobby seemed to take forever. I caught my reflection in the polished doors and straightened my tie. I looked good, I decided. Successful. The kind of person who'd made something of himself since high school. The kind of person who belonged at a reunion. The lobby was bustling with activity, and I immediately spotted people I recognized. There was Jennifer Martinez, who'd been student body president, talking animatedly to a group by the front desk. She looked exactly the same, just with professional makeup and a designer dress. And over by the bar, I could see what looked like half of our old football team. All of them thicker around the middle but still carrying themselves with that particular athletic confidence. I followed the signs toward the Grand Ballroom, my heart rate picking up with each step. A banner stretched across the entrance. Jefferson High Class of 2004, 20-year reunion. Seeing our graduation year in bold letters made it feel official, real. The entrance was set up with registration tables, manned by volunteers I recognized as former classmates. There were name tags laid out in alphabetical order, and I could see people searching through them, squealing with delight when they found their own names and then immediately looking for friends. I approached the table marked AM with a confident smile. Behind it sat Tracy Williams, who'd been in my AP English class. She'd aged well, her blonde hair now styled in an expensive-looking bob, her smile as bright as I remembered. "Daniel," she said, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely sure of my name. "How wonderful that you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, feeling proud of how natural I sounded. "This is so exciting. The place looks amazing." Tracy's smile flickered slightly as she began searching through the name tags. "Chen, right? Daniel Chen?" "That's right." I watched as her fingers moved through the C section, then back to the beginning, then through again more slowly. She frowned, a small line appearing between her eyebrows. Let me check the other table." She called over to the volunteer at the NZ table. "Sarah, do you have a Daniel Chen over there?" Sarah, whom I vaguely recognized as someone who'd been in band with me, shook her head after a quick search. "No Chen here." Tracy turned back to me, her professional reunion volunteer smile now tinged with uncertainty. "I'm so sorry, but I don't see your name on our list. Are you sure you registered?" The question hit me like cold water. Yes, I'm sure. I clicked attending on the Facebook event months ago. "Oh, well, the Facebook thing was just to gauge interest," Tracy explained, her voice taking on that careful tone people use when delivering bad news. "We had to send out formal invitations with RSVP cards. Did you get one in the mail?" I felt something sink in my stomach. "No, I don't think so, but I assumed. I graduated with everyone else. I should be on the alumni list." Tracy's smile was becoming more strained by the second. "Of course you should be. This must be some kind of mistake. Let me call Karen Mitchell. She was in charge of the invitations." She pulled out her phone and stepped aside, speaking in hushed tones. I stood there feeling increasingly exposed as other people flowed around me, finding their name tags with ease, greeting each other with enthusiastic hugs. The noise in the lobby seemed to get louder while I waited, the laughter sharper, the conversations more animated. I was acutely aware of how I must look. A man in a nice suit standing awkwardly by the registration table while everyone else moved confidently into the ballroom. Tracy returned, her expression apologetic but definitive. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. Karen says there was definitely an oversight. Your name somehow didn't make it onto the master list when they compiled the addresses from the school's alumni database. It happens sometimes, people who move around a lot, or if there were errors in the original records." "But I haven't moved around that much," I said, though even as I said it I realized it wasn't entirely true. College in California, then graduate school in Boston, then the job in Seattle, then back here to Portland 5 years ago. Maybe my information had gotten lost in the shuffle. I know, these things are never anyone's fault specifically. The important thing is that you're here now. I'm sure we can work something out." She looked around helplessly, clearly out of her depth. Behind me, I could hear people calling out to each other. The kind of joyful recognition that happens when people reconnect after years apart. The contrast between their easy belonging and my uncertain status was becoming more painful by the second. Is there a way I can still get in?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Tracy bit her lip. "Well, the thing is, we had to give final numbers to the caterer yesterday, and the tickets were $75 each to cover dinner and drinks." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. $75. I had that in my wallet, obviously. But the message was clear. I wasn't invited, my dinner hadn't been ordered, my presents hadn't been planned for. I was an unexpected complication in their carefully organized evening. "I can pay," I said quickly. "I don't need dinner. I just want to see everyone." "Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine," Tracy said, though she didn't sound sure at all. "Let me just check with the committee chairs real quick." She walked over to a group of people huddled near the ballroom entrance. I recognized them as the popular kids from high school, the ones who'd been on homecoming court, who'd run student government, who'd organized all the social events. They were the natural choice to plan a reunion, the people everyone remembered and trusted to do things right. I watched from across the lobby as Tracy explained the situation, gesturing back toward me. I saw heads turn in my direction, faces squinting with the effort of trying to place me. Someone shrugged. Someone else shook their head. The conversation continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. When Tracy returned, her smile was even more forced than before. So here's what we can do. We can absolutely let you in. Of course we can. You're one of us. But it's going to be $85 to cover the extra meal, and the processing fees we'll have to pay the hotel. $85 to attend my own reunion. $85 because my name had been forgotten, overlooked, lost in some administrative shuffle. The amount wasn't the problem. I could afford it easily. The problem was what it represented. I was being charged a penalty for existing, for having the audacity to show up somewhere I wasn't expected. Okay, I said, reaching for my wallet. That's fine. But even as I handed over the cash, I could feel something shifting inside me. The excitement I'd felt driving over here was curdling into something else. Humiliation, maybe. Or just a deep, hollow disappointment. Tracy accepted the money with visible relief and quickly hand-wrote a name tag for me. Hello, my name is Daniel Chen, in neat block letters, though she misspelled my last name at first and had to cross it out. The handwritten tag looked amateurish next to all the professionally printed ones, a visible reminder that I was an afterthought. There you go, she said brightly. Welcome to the reunion. I stuck the tag to my lapel and headed toward the ballroom, but the confidence I'd walked in with was completely gone. Instead of feeling like I belonged, I felt like an intruder who'd paid his way in. Every person who glanced at my handwritten name tag was a reminder that I hadn't been important enough to remember in the first place. The grand ballroom had been transformed with our school colors, blue and gold decorations everywhere, photo displays showing candid shots from our high school years, and a DJ playing hits from the early 2000s. Round tables filled the space, each one marked with a year from our high school experience. It should have been magical, nostalgic, exactly what I'd been hoping for. Instead, it felt like a party I was crashing. I grabbed a beer from the bar and found a spot along the wall where I could observe without having to actively mingle. The room was full of people I recognized but hadn't talked to in 20 years. They all seemed to know exactly where they belonged, moving effortlessly between groups, picking up conversations that had probably been ongoing on social media for years. I watched Jennifer Martinez hold court near the dessert table, surrounded by the same circle of friends she'd had in high school. The football players had claimed a table near the bar and were getting progressively louder with each round of drinks. The theater kids had found each other too, clustered around the photo displays and pointing out pictures of their past performances. Everyone had their tribe, their natural place in this ecosystem. Everyone except me. I'd always been between groups in high school, smart enough to be in honors classes but not quite nerdy enough for the academic crowd, interested in music but too shy to really fit in with the band kids, friendly enough with everyone but not close enough to anyone to guarantee lasting connections. I'd hoped that 20 years would have erased those old social boundaries, but looking around the room, I could see that they were as strong as ever. Daniel? Daniel Chen? I turned to find myself face to face with Mike Patterson, who'd sat behind me in calculus senior year. He looked genuinely pleased to see me, which was such a relief that I felt my shoulders relax for the first time since arriving. Mike, how are you, man? I shook his hand with probably too much enthusiasm. I'm good. Wow, you look great. I almost didn't recognize you without the glasses. Contacts, I explained. And LASIK surgery about 10 years ago. That's awesome. So what are you up to these days? Still in Portland? For the first time all evening, I got to give one of the answers I'd practiced. I told him about my job, about Rachel, about the house we'd bought in Hawthorne. He seemed genuinely interested, nodding and asking follow-up questions. This was what I'd been hoping for. Real conversation, genuine connection. That's fantastic, Mike said when I finished. You always were one of the smart ones. I remember you helping me with calculus problems. I remembered that too, actually. Mike had been struggling with derivatives, and I'd stayed after class several times to help him work through practice problems. It hadn't felt like a big deal at the time, but apparently it had made enough of an impression that he still remembered it 20 years later. What about you? I asked. What are you doing now? Mike launched into his own story. He was a civil engineer, married with 3 kids, coaching Little League on weekends. As he talked, I felt some of my earlier disappointment starting to fade. This was nice. This was what reunions were supposed to be about. Hey, you should come sit with us, Mike said, gesturing toward a table in the middle of the room. We've got some of the old math team crowd over there. Everyone would love to see you. Math team, I had been on the math team, though I'd kind of forgotten about it until he mentioned it. We'd been a small group, maybe 8 or 10 people, who'd met after school twice a week to prepare for competitions. Not exactly the most social of activities, but Mike was right that we'd been friendly with each other. I followed him over to the table and was greeted with varying degrees of recognition and enthusiasm. Some people remembered me clearly, others took a moment to place me, but everyone was welcoming. They made space for me at the table, included me in their ongoing conversation about careers and families and the changes to our old neighborhood. For about an hour, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from shared memories to current events to speculation about which classmates had changed the most. Someone brought up Mrs. Rodriguez, our calculus teacher, and we all shared stories about her notorious pop quizzes. Someone else remembered the time we'd all stayed late to help decorate for the winter formal, even though most of us weren't going. I was in the middle of telling a story about my current job when I noticed that the conversation at the next table had gotten quieter. Not stopped exactly, but the energy had shifted in a way that made me glance over. What I saw made my stomach drop. Karen Mitchell, the reunion committee chair Tracy had called earlier, was sitting at the head table with several other organizers, and she kept looking over at our table. More specifically, she kept looking at me. I tried to ignore it and continue my story, but I could feel her attention like a weight. When I finished talking, there was an awkward pause where everyone seemed to sense the tension, but no one knew what to address it. "Excuse me for just a second," I said, standing up. "I'm going to grab another drink." But instead of going to the bar, I found myself walking toward the exit. I needed air, space to think. The lobby was quieter now, most of the reunion attendees having made their way into the ballroom. I found a chair in a corner and sat down, trying to process what was happening. My phone buzzed with another text from Rachel. "How's it going? Having fun?" I stared at the message, not sure how to respond. Was I having fun? Parts of it had been nice, talking with Mike, sitting with the math team group, feeling like I belonged somewhere. But underneath it all was this nagging sense that I was only there on sufferance, that my presence was barely tolerated rather than genuinely welcomed. "Daniel?" I looked up to see Karen Mitchell approaching, her expression serious. She was wearing a name tag that said, "Hello, my name is Karen, Reunion Committee," in the same professional font that everyone else had gotten. Up close, I could see that she'd aged well. Her hair was shorter and professionally styled, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd been successful in life. "Hi, Karen," I said, standing up. "Great event. You guys did an amazing job with the decorations." "Thank you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to apologize again for the mix-up with your invitation. Tracy told me what happened at check-in." "Oh, it's no problem. These things happen." Karen nodded, but she still looked uncomfortable. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk privately for a minute. Do you have time?" Something in her tone made my chest tighten. "Sure." She led me to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the few people who were still milling around. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Karen seemed to be choosing her words carefully. "Daniel," she said finally, "I need to be honest with you about something." I waited. "Your name wasn't accidentally left off the list." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face get hot, my heart rate spike. "What do you mean?" Karen looked genuinely pained. "There was a discussion about the invitation list. The committee went through the yearbook page by page, trying to make sure we had everyone. When we got to your page, someone said maybe we shouldn't include you." I couldn't speak. The lobby seemed to tilt around me. "I want you to know that I disagreed," Karen continued quickly. "I thought it was wrong. But I was outvoted, and honestly, I should have fought harder. I should have insisted." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why wouldn't you invite me?" Karen closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage. "Do you remember the incident with Brad Morrison's senior year?" Brad Morrison. The name brought back a flood of memories I'd spent 20 years trying to forget. Brad had been one of the golden boys of our class, star quarterback, dating the homecoming queen, destined for great things. He'd also been a bully who'd made my life hell for most of senior year. "I remember," I said. "You reported him for cheating on the SATs." The accusation hung in the air between us. I remembered that too, though I'd tried not to think about it for 2 decades. Brad had been sitting next to me during a practice test, and I'd seen him copying answers from my sheet. When I'd noticed him doing the same thing during the actual SAT, I'd agonized for weeks before finally telling a counselor what I'd seen. "He was cheating," I said quietly. "I know, and you were right to report it. It was the ethical thing to do." Karen's voice was gentle but firm. "But it cost him his scholarship to Oregon State. His whole future changed because of that report. That wasn't my fault. That was his fault for cheating in the first place." "You're absolutely right, but, well, Brad has been very successful since then. He owns 3 car dealerships now, does a lot of charity work in town. He's been generous with donations to various class activities over the years." I felt sick. "So you didn't invite me because it might make Brad uncomfortable?" "Not me. I didn't make that choice, but when it came up in committee discussion, someone pointed out that it might be awkward, that maybe it would be better if we just kept the invitation list to people who were more central to the class experience." Central to the class experience? A euphemism that meant popular, well-liked, uncomplicated. A euphemism that meant not me. "Brad pushed for this?" I asked. "No, actually. Brad doesn't even know about the committee discussion. It was Jessica Fernandez who brought it up." Jessica Fernandez. Brad's girlfriend senior year, now presumably his wife. The homecoming queen who'd never spoken to me directly in 4 years of high school. "She remembered the incident?" I asked. "She remembered that you were the one who reported him. She felt that having you there might bring up painful memories for Brad, might make the whole evening uncomfortable for everyone." Everyone. As if my presence would somehow contaminate the entire event, turning celebration into awkwardness. "So, you decided I didn't belong there?" "I decided nothing," Karen said firmly. "I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know the truth, and because I think what they did was wrong. You graduated with us. You were part of our class. You had every right to be invited." I looked back toward the ballroom, where I could hear the DJ announcing that it was time for the class photo. All my former classmates were probably gathering on the small stage, arranging themselves in rows, smiling for a picture that would commemorate this night. A picture I wouldn't be in, because someone had decided I didn't belong. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because when I saw you earlier, talking with Mike and his friends, you looked so happy. You looked like you were having a good time, like you were glad to be here. And I felt terrible about what we'd done." I appreciated her honesty, but it made everything worse. Knowing that my exclusion had been deliberate, calculated, made the humiliation complete. I hadn't been forgotten or overlooked. I'd been actively erased. "I should go," I said. "You don't have to leave," Karen said quickly. "You're here now. You paid to get in. You have just as much right to be here as anyone else." But that wasn't true, and we both knew it. I was there as an unwanted interloper, someone who'd forced his way into a party where he wasn't welcome. Every moment I stayed was a moment of trespassing. "I think I do need to leave," I said. Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but she just nodded. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm really, truly sorry." I walked toward the elevator, past the ballroom entrance where I could hear my classmates laughing and calling out to each other for the photo. Through the doorway, I caught a glimpse of the staged scene. Everyone arranged in neat rows, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling broadly for the camera. 20 years from now, when they looked at that picture, I wouldn't be in it. Just like I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Just like I'd never really been part of their story in the first place. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. I walked to my car in silence, got in, and sat there for a long moment before starting the engine. My phone was buzzing with texts, Rachel checking in again, probably wondering why I hadn't sent any photos yet. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying Karen's words. The whole evening felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. Had I really paid $85 to attend an event I'd been deliberately excluded from? Had I really been so naive as to think that 20 years would have erased the social hierarchies of high school? Rachel was waiting up for me when I got home, curled up on the couch with a book and a cup of tea. She took one look at my face and set everything aside. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. The missing name tag, the awkward check-in process, The conversation with Karen. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression growing more outraged with each detail. "That's horrible," she said when I finished. "That's absolutely horrible. How dare they treat you like that?" "Maybe they had a point," I said, surprising myself with the words. "Maybe I didn't belong there." "Don't you dare," Rachel said fiercely. "Don't you dare let them make you think that. You graduated from that school. You were part of that class. You had every right to be there, and the fact that they excluded you says everything about them and nothing about you." I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was too fresh, too deep. 20 years later, I was still the awkward kid eating lunch alone in the chemistry lab. 20 years later, I was still invisible to the people who mattered. That night, I lay awake replaying the evening over and over. I thought about Mike and how genuinely happy he'd been to see me. I thought about the math team table and how easily I'd fit in with that group. I thought about all the conversations I'd had about careers and families and the changes in our old neighborhood. And I thought about Jessica Fernandez deciding that my presence would make people uncomfortable. I thought about Brad Morrison, who probably didn't even remember the incident that had shaped so much of my senior year experience. I thought about a committee of people I'd gone to school with for 4 years, voting to erase me from their shared history. But as the hours passed, something else started to emerge from the hurt and humiliation. Anger, yes, but also a strange kind of clarity. I'd been so focused on proving that I belonged, on showing everyone how successful I'd become, that I'd forgotten to ask myself whether I actually wanted to belong to this group. These were people who'd excluded a classmate because it might be awkward to include him. These were people who'd prioritized the comfort of a bully over the rights of his victim. Did I really want their approval so desperately? The next morning, Rachel suggested I write about the experience. "Get it all out," she said. "Sometimes writing things down helps you process them." Salfer? So I did. I wrote about the anticipation and the excitement, about the humiliation and the hurt. I wrote about Karen's revelation and my decision to leave. I wrote about feeling like an outsider looking in, about the ways high school social dynamics persist long after graduation. And as I wrote, I realized something that surprised me. I felt sorry for them. I felt sorry for people who were so trapped in their high school identities that they couldn't imagine including someone who'd challenged their social order. I felt sorry for Jessica Fernandez, who was apparently still so invested in protecting her boyfriend's reputation that she'd actively worked to exclude his accuser. I felt sorry for committee members who'd gone along with the exclusion rather than standing up for what was right. Most of all, I felt sorry for Brad Morrison, who'd probably spent 20 years living with the knowledge that his college plans had been derailed by his own poor choices, and who now had friends who thought he was so fragile that he couldn't handle being in the same room as the person who'd reported him. I, on the other hand, had built a life I was proud of. I had a job I loved, a marriage that made me happy, friends who valued my integrity rather than seeing it as a liability. I had moved beyond high school in ways that some of my former classmates apparently had not. The reunion had been meant to be a celebration of where we'd all ended up 20 years later. In a strange way, it had been exactly that, just not in the way anyone had intended. A week after the reunion, I got a Facebook message from Mike Patterson. He said he'd noticed I'd left early and wanted to make sure everything was okay. He invited me and Rachel to dinner the next weekend, said he'd love for his wife to meet me. I accepted, and we had a wonderful time. Mike and his wife Sarah were warm, funny people who seemed genuinely interested in our lives and happy to include us in theirs. We made plans to get together again soon. Over the next few months, I reconnected with several other people from the math team table. It turned out that most of them lived in the area, and we started meeting for happy hour once a month. These were the people who remembered me helping with calculus problems, who valued intelligence and kindness over popularity and social status. I never heard from anyone on the reunion committee again, though I occasionally saw updates on social media about other class events I wasn't invited to. It stung at first, but less and less as time went on. Jessica Fernandez posted the official reunion photos on the class Facebook page a few weeks later. I looked through them with curiosity rather than pain. There was the group photo I'd missed, everyone arranged in neat rows and smiling broadly. There were candid shots of people dancing, talking, laughing. It looked like they'd had a good time. I wasn't in any of the pictures, of course. 20 years from now, when classmates looked through these photos, there would be no evidence that I'd been there at all. In the official record of our 20-year reunion, I didn't exist. But I found I was okay with that. The people who mattered, Mike and the others who'd welcomed me genuinely, knew I'd been there. They knew I'd belonged. And increasingly, that felt like enough. 6 months after the reunion, I got a LinkedIn message from Brad Morrison. He was apparently looking to hire a marketing consultant for his dealerships and had come across my profile. The message was professional and friendly, with no indication that he remembered or cared about our senior year conflict. I politely declined the job offer and wished him well in his search. It felt good to be gracious, to take the high road. It felt like closure. The reunion had taught me something important about belonging. I'd spent so much energy over the years wondering whether I fit in, whether I was accepted, whether people liked me. The evening had forced me to confront the possibility that some people might not, and the world hadn't ended. More importantly, it had reminded me that the people whose approval I'd been seeking might not be people whose values I actually shared. I'd been so focused on proving I deserved to be included that I'd forgotten to ask whether inclusion in their group was actually something worth wanting. The math team friends who'd welcomed me that night, Mike, who'd remembered my help with calculus, Rachel, who'd been outraged on my behalf. These were my people. These were the relationships that mattered, the connections worth nurturing. I still think about that night sometimes. I think about walking into the Marriott with such high hopes, about the excitement of seeing my name tag and joining in the celebration. I think about the humiliation of learning I'd been deliberately excluded, the sick feeling of realizing I wasn't wanted there. But mostly, I think about the moment I decided to leave. It had felt like defeat at the time, like giving up and letting them win. Now it feels like something else entirely. It feels like the moment I finally grew up.